The Utah Mammoth. So before we start talking the team, and the players, the new market, and all this other stuff, they were the Utah Hockey Club a year ago. They're the Utah Mammoth now. And I've gotten to know some of the quirks and the likes and dislikes that you have, Neil. And one of the aversions that you have are teams that don't end with the letter S. And so of the 6 finalists for the eventual team name, and of course, they end up as the Mammoth, the other 5 contenders were to keep Utah Hockey Club, the Blizzard, Outlaws, Venom, and the Yeti. So is it safe to say that, given your preference of the letter S, that your nickname of choice was going to be the Outlaws?
Oh, absolutely. And I said that on Utah radio. I said I want an S at the end of that. There are a number of teams in the league now that do not have an S at the end. There's the Avalanche, the Wild, the Lightning, and I'm probably not remembering a few others. The Kraken. I'm old school. I like the original 6 all had an S at the end, or have an S at the end. And I just like to see an S. I find it hard to think that Clayton Keller walks around Salt Lake City and says, I'm a Mammoth. Like you walk around New York, you say, I'm a Ranger, or walk around Toronto, I'm a Leaf. Even I'm a Blue. I'm one of the Blues, but I'm one of the Mammoth. Anyway.
Do you like the logo, at least, with the woolly mammoth, the profile, the tusks?
I guess so. Yeah, sure. It's a little bit like the team we're going to talk about after the Mammoth and their logo.
Meaning the prehistoric saber-toothed tiger. But we are really digressing here. So let's jump into a team that I think has a lot of promise. And they finished last season 6th in the Central, 89 points. But probably the biggest bugaboo that they had was an 18-15-8 mark at home. And if we're doing real math, that's 23 losses in 41 home games. And that was essentially the difference between them really knocking at the door and them ending up on the fringes.
Yeah, that certainly was. And that was talked about a lot, why their home record wasn't as good as it had been the year before when they played in that little bandbox in Phoenix, the Mullet Arena, where the college team plays. That's something that Coach Tourigny is going to have to look at and try to figure that out, because you can lose on the road and your fans don't get mad. They don't like you losing at home where they're watching it. So that's one thing that Utah's got to get turned around.
And I think for this club also, it's time, because they've missed the playoffs for 5 consecutive seasons and 12 out of 13 years, including their time back in Arizona. They do make a very significant offensive acquisition, picking up right-wing J.J. Peterka in a trade with the Buffalo Sabres in exchange for Josh Stone and Michael Kesselring. Peterka then turns around and signs as an RFA for 5 years at 7.7 EV. They also bring in left-wing Brandon Tanev as a UFA from Winnipeg. Scott Perunovich, defenseman that was not qualified by the New York Islanders. And a pair from the defending champion Panthers, defenseman Nate Schmidt, 3 years, $3.5 million on average, and backup goaltender for Carol Vejmelka, Vitek Vaněček, signed for 1 year, $1.5 million. So you got a little bit championship pedigree there. And I thought that was pretty significant. And in addition, players that they managed to re-sign from their own organization, pending UFAs, Keller Yamamoto and defenseman Nick DeSimone, and also left wing Michael Carcone. And in terms of RFAs, center Jack McBain, who you may remember probably had his biggest piece of notoriety last year because he was the player that collided with Alex Ovechkin and broke Ovi's leg.
Yeah, and that was really an unfortunate situation. And Ovi never thought that the guy did it on purpose. They just happened to hit legs together right at center ice. I remember that. Obviously, Ovechkin came back no worse for wear when he did rejoin the Capitals. But this is an organization and a team that's got to get into the playoffs. Not necessarily this year, but they better be banging on the door this year. They got to be banging on the door. They got a coach in Andre Tourigny, who's never made the playoffs, coaching their team, and he's going into his 5th season. And it's tough in the NHL to get it 5 seasons as a head coach and never make the playoffs.
I think Bill Armstrong is going to have a short leash here because he's put a lot of pieces in place. They really didn't lose a lot in addition to Doan and Kesselring, who we said before, Matias Michelli was traded to Toronto for a 3rd-round pick in 2027. And we had just mentioned that Nick Bjugstad signed as a UFA with the St. Louis Blues. And Robert Bortuzzo, who has not officially retired, but he's not expected to come back on the Utah backline. But I look at the personnel on this club, and I see a coach that has 4 full seasons under his belt now. And how many of those coaches failed to make the playoffs each of those years and still keep their job? So I believe Tourigny's got to get this club off to a good start, or I could see a change by Thanksgiving in Utah.
That could very well happen. The only thing that you got to remember, though, Vic, is that Bill Armstrong and Tourigny go back to Phoenix days together. So they've been together quite a while, and it's not as if Bill Armstrong acquired Tourigny from a previous regime. One of the things that we really need to touch on is the Utah goaltending, and let's go back a year. Connor Ingram was supposed to be the heir apparent to be the number 1. Karel Vejmelka was his backup. They were going to try to give it to Ingram. It didn't work. Ingram had some issues, off-ice issues that were disturbing him and got him off his game. He ended up going into an assistance program, not for drugs and alcohol, but for some other situations that he had. Karel Vejmelka played very well for Utah when he came in and took over as number 1. And I guess because of that's why they signed Vaněček to make sure that they had 2 capable goalies all year long, because they can't trust that Ingram will be there. And I'm not criticizing him or saying anything that he's done is wrong or bad. I'm just saying when you go through a year like they had last year and he completely leaves the team, you got to be worried starting this season. So that's why they've got the 3.
What impresses you about this forward group? Because I think there's a lot to like here. And when I went through this team and I did the research, so much of Utah looks a lot like St. Louis to me, just in terms of the amount of depth that they have, both on forward and defense.
I think they're a younger team. I really like the Peterka move by Bill Armstrong, bringing him in. I think that was, I don't understand Buffalo trading Peterka.
Yeah,
I really don't. I like Clayton Keller. He's a up-and-comer, budding star. Dylan Gunther can shoot the puck a ton. Logan Cooley's a good centerman for them. After that, they don't have real great offensive weapons other than Peterka, Schmaltz, Hayton, and are okay. Lawson, Crouse, and you can go on through the rest of them. They're the bottom 6, and they're not real great scorers. You get some good offensive efforts out of their defense when you talk about Sergachev, who they brought in from Tampa. Oli Mata can do some offensive things. I really like the Nate Schmidt signing. I thought he was fabulous for Florida in the playoffs. And how do they compare to St. Louis? I think they're younger than St. Louis, and they're going to be right in there, and they got to be banging at the door, as we said.
Yeah, my only suggestion was that it just like looks on paper to me that the structure of the teams, their composition is somewhat similar. And I think, as you made the point, I think they're going to be banging heads for one of those 2 wild card spots. A couple of prospects to look for. Tij Iginla center, who's the 6th overall pick in 2024, at 32 points in 21 games, and was a plus 18 for Kelowna in the Western League last year. And he's, of course, is the son of Hall of Famer Jerome Iginla. And also, goaltender to look out for, Michael Hrabal, who split his time last year, actually the last couple of seasons, between the Czech under-20 league and UMass Amherst. He's got a potential to crack into that lineup perhaps later in the year.
Yeah, so you got to look. And you know what? This is a young organization that's trying to build the right way. They're trying to build it through the draft and player development. And so that wouldn't surprise me if one of those guys could, either Iginla or the goaltender, could show up in Utah.
I'm looking forward to this year. Now that the adjustment has been made, the players are entrenched in the community, and now they should enjoy all the comforts of home, which obviously they didn't do in year one in Salt Lake City.
No, they didn't enjoy winning in Salt Lake City, but from what I hear from everybody, it's a great place to play. And Salt Lake is getting used to having a major league hockey team, and that's going to take a while.